just terrifying.
The food groups can easily be sorted using the simple health chain.
It's also about how certain name brand products. The underlying theme here is clear. The kid show these three characters are in throughout the entirety of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared sets out to deliver lessons about the world, but either fails miserably or succeeds in intentionally brainwashing kids to a specific point of view.
Ever since then, the children of these age groups have been brainwashed into thinking a certain way.
Becky and Joe promised that with this final episode, everything would be revealed, and they didn't let us down.
The
Roy,
box of oats,
characters,
three bowls laid out.
and this
Yes,
explains everything.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I
Nice.
swear it
The episode opens with three bedrooms. Every time the customer decided The Amazing World of Gumball had an episode written by Becky and Joe, the creators of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. It hasn't aired on Cartoon Network yet, but you can watch it online. It even stars Baker Terry, who voices the majority of the characters in the original Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. You'll recognize his voice mostly by the yellow guy or the bird, but in this episode of Gumball, he voices two of the main puppets and a few of the others in this imaginary world. The episode is about Gumball and Darwin going through boxes they find in the attic. They come across these puppets that they used to play with when they were kids. Darwin remembers the good old days and refuses to let the puppets go and promises to keep them on his hands forever. Gumball throws them away and tells him he needs to grow up, but later that night they come to life and kidnap Darwin and take him to the imaginary world that he and Gumball created when they were both kids, so they can play with him forever. Gumball now has to follow him behind with his puppet to try and save Darwin from the clutches of these monsters, I guess. Overall, I loved this episode. My only problem with it was that we didn't spend enough time in the imaginary world as I would have liked. It would have been so nice to see a little more around this place and see what else they could have come up with if we'd have gotten a little bit more time than just 10 minutes. But that is being a little nitpicky. As I watched the show though, I couldn't help notice some huge similarities between this episode and Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. And not just references to characters, but potentially an original meaning behind Becky and Joe's most famous show. In my very first theory on this, I suggested that one of the main elements of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared was about growing up, which coincidentally is what this episode of Gumball is about. My theory suggested that all the puppets were growing up into adulthood. I believe the puppets represent the different age groups of the children that watch these kid shows. Hence, why none of them have actual names. So what do I think is happening in episode 4 and 5? I think they're growing up. But then later I narrowed it down to the red guy representing teenagers and eventually growing up to escape the media and so forth. Having watched this episode of Gumball though, I ended up rethinking a few things. Right now I'm going to suggest a new theory. It won't be fully fleshed out, but I'd like to throw it into the ring and see what people think about it. Yeah, since it's a new idea kinda, we need to push everything else to the side and focus distinctly on the growing up element, because that's what this episode of Gumball seemed to focus on. Darwin refuses to remove the puppets from his hands and promises to keep them there forever. He keeps them on both of his hands in the real world, but when he's in the imaginary world, they're alive and dancing around. This seems very similar to the red guy in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared episode 6. He's on stage in the quote-unquote real world and performing with two puppets on both of his hands, but when he's in the imaginary world, they're alive and dancing around, just like the puppets in Gumball. So what I'm going to suggest is, what if this episode of Gumball is actually portraying what we saw in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared? What if this episode of Gumball is telling the exact same story we were seeing in this bizarre web series? Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared could be about kids not wanting to grow up into adulthood because it's dull and boring. The red guy represents these kids who don't want to grow up. Think about it. When you're a kid, you always create your own imaginary world, and kids usually spend most of their time in this said world once it's created. They also have toys they take into this world and usually pretend that they're alive. In Gumball, the imaginary world was created by themselves when they were kids, and the puppets that were on Darwin's hands in the real world are alive in this world, similar to Yellow Guy and Duck in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. In the Gumball episode though, the puppets in the imaginary world also didn't want Darwin to leave. They wanted wanted him to stay forever, and they kept on singing "The fun will never end." This reminds me of the teachers in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared constantly keeping the main three characters distracted, or more importantly, the red guy. Also notice how none of the teachers ever know what they're talking about. It's because these teachers were made up in the mind of a child, and these teachers present these lessons in the way a child would imagine it. They don't fully grasp what the lesson is, so they just make it up and go along with it. Also, we've never addressed the weirdness of the show. Why does it go dark at the end of each episode? Why do the puppets end up covered in blood? It's because this is the mind of a child pulling their toys apart. Have you ever seen a kid when they play with toys? One minute it can be all happy and jolly, nothing going wrong, but then a second later they're pulling the arms off of their toys, dipping them in paint, glitter, etc. This is hinted in the episode of Gumball when Darwin is pulling out all of the toys from when they were younger and finding out they're all broken because they've either dropped them or just left the batteries to die. Even the birthday party references in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared make sense with this idea. The birthday parties are the sign of getting older, but also are one of the most fun times when you're a kid. Even June 19th makes sense with this idea. Why is it always June 19th? It's because it represents the red guy refusing to get any older. So in his imaginary world that he created, he'll never get any older because it's always June 19th, every single day. Time has fully stopped. The 19th of June, 1955 was the day the red guy ran away to his imaginary world with his puppets because he doesn't want to grow up and become an adult because it's boring and nothing ever fun happens there. So he's been living in his imaginary world for over 60 years, hiding from it. I also think the teachers in this world don't want Red Guy to leave either, because once the Red Guy grows up, they won't have anyone to play with. So their goal is to keep him distracted. Let's go through each episode. Episode 1 is showing Red Guy having fun with his puppet friends, being creative. But there is one time in this episode that shows a sign of change in the Red Guy. When the notepad says she uses her hair to express herself, the Red Guy responds with, "That sounds really boring."
I use my hair to express myself.
That sounds really boring.
The notepad is silent for a second and then repeats what she said.
I use my hair to express myself.
The notepad didn't know how to respond to this statement because it's never happened before, so she just repeated what she said because she wasn't expecting an adult response. It's an adult response because we've seen another Red Guy say it.
That sounds really boring.
Episode 2, Red Guy kind of wants to sit down and watch a show.
Come on guys, stop mucking around. We only have 5 minutes until our show's on.
But the talking clock won't let him, because sitting around watching shows is not what a kid would do. Kids need to explore and go on adventures 24/7, or at least that's what this world is designed to do. The second you show signs of not wanting to do that, or at least be as active as you were, it could be considered a sign of getting older. Episode 3 seems to be about the yellow guy, but notice how the last line before the butterfly appears and starts singing, it was from the red guy.
I wonder what will happen.
The camera focuses directly on him as he says, "I wonder what will happen," implying that he already knows what's going to happen. He created the scenario in his head. Also take note how in this episode Red Guy isn't moving at all. He sat down having a picnic while one of his puppets goes through this lesson. Episode 4 is the breaking point. The realization that this world is not real and that he needs to finally face facts. You can't stay in your imaginary world forever. Someday you have to grow up. Episode 5, you'd have thought that the imaginary world would no longer exist. If the red guy had grown up, then this world should have ended by now, right? Well, while he has left the imaginary world, it's very clear he still thinks about it, and you can still see him every so often in this episode, meaning he still hasn't fully let go of this world he created. His puppet friend, the duck, starts to realize something isn't right, figuring out his friend is no longer there, and therefore realizing that he may never see him again. The whole place goes insane after the duck tries to leave and ends up getting fed to the yellow guy in a bizarre nonsense overload. probably a sign of the world losing its creativity as the red guy gets older. As in this episode, there aren't many lyrics to the song that's been sung. It's normally just filler. Instead of singing, at one point the steak guy just dances, as if it's almost like a distraction because they don't know what to sing. Even the can of food just randomly makes noises and goes straight to the chorus sometimes. Episode 6 then comes along and hints towards this whole world being in the red guy's head. When the yellow guy drowns in oil, we then flash to a shot of the red guy sleeping and waking up, hinting that this is all happening in the red guy's head. Even at the bar when he's on stage and then all of a sudden we switch to the dark room with the puppet microphone. This to me looks like it's suggesting that we are now in the mind of the red guy. I came to this conclusion as the machine in this dark room is clearly designed to control the imaginary world with all the puppets. This dark room to me must be the red guy's mind, and this is where he controls his world. But someone reaches out to him and stops him, makes him come to the realization that he really does need to let go of this world. Roy. Roy is always presented as the bad guy, and while he may appear to be the villain to the characters, I don't believe his intentions are bad. If this is the mind of the red guy and Roy can appear in it, he's clearly connected to the red guy in some way. And the best I can think of, since he is a puppet and he's not real, I believe Roy represents the change from a kid to an adult, hence why he is known as a father in the show. The reason why he's presented as the yellow guy's father is because the yellow guy is the easiest way to present this idea to the audience, because the yellow guy is quite clearly a kid and Roy is very clearly a father. You couldn't really portray that with the red guy since the red guy seems to be the same as everyone else. Either way, he's the one that's causing the change in red guy. Who knows, maybe he represents puberty overall. To me, he's clearly a big part in the change of red guy's journey from kid to an adult. If Darwin in the Amazing World of Gumball represents the red guy not wanting to grow up and eventually being trapped in his own imaginary world, then Gumball in this episode could be representing Roy, traveling into this imaginary world to save the red guy. Since Gumball's puppet seemed very similar to Roy, this is what led me to that possibility. Roy is merely trying to push the red guy in the right direction. And when red guy finally leaves the imaginary world, look who's in the corner the second he does. When the red guy is still clinging onto his puppets and dancing around on stage, guess who is in the corner watching him? Side note, I know this part is in the real world, but because we can see a dramatic light appearing onto Roy, to me it suggests that this is just an illusion and Roy isn't actually there. In episode 6, red guy finally realizes it's time to face facts and grow up after Roy reaches out to him. He decides to pull the plug on the whole thing and end it there. We then see new characters at the very end, which to me represent the red guy passing down his toys, puppets, for another kid to have fun with. Similar to the ending in Gumball, they're pretty much happy to pass down their toys to someone else. Each character is a different color to what they were before, but I think this is to signify change. The date finally moves from 19th to the 20th, signifying he's finally grown up. Overall, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared represents growing up from the perspective of a kid. Yeah, okay, it isn't the most fully fleshed out theory, but I really just wanted to throw this idea into the ring to see what everyone else thinks. To me, it seems like it makes a lot more sense than most of my other stuff, but to you guys, I don't know, it could be absolute garbage, who knows? Thanks so much guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like or subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Yeah, or if you actually want to see more Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared stuff, I actually did a live stream just a few days ago with my buddy Looney Turtle on his channel, The Looney Turtle. Coincidentally, we do this live stream every 2 weeks on a Wednesday at 9 something mid standard time. I don't know. If you want to check it out, whatever, it doesn't matter. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. Stay safe and don't pull a Picard.